You don't know what it is to be erased until you see your own childhood staring back at you from a museum wall with someone else's name beneath it. I was 28 years old, working as a gallery assistant at the prestigious Mercer Modern. My job was to be a ghost, to hang paintings without leaving fingerprints, to adjust lighting without casting a shadow, to serve wealthy patrons without being seen. The night of the Alistair Crane retrospective, I was polishing a glass case containing Crane's early juvenilia. Crane was the art world's darling, a reclusive genius who'd emerged fully formed at 22 with his Found Fragments series. The story was romantic, a troubled youth raised in the system who'd channeled his pain into breathtaking collages made from discarded materials. I was adjusting a spotlight when I saw it. Behind the glass, among Crane's supposed childhood drawings, was a small, torn piece of watercolor paper. On it, a crude but unmistakable blue whale with one eye larger than the other, swimming through waves of chaotic green. In the corner, in faded pencil, For River, Love, Soul, 6/10, 2004. My breath left my body. The glass cleaner slipped from my hand, hitting the marble floor with a crack that echoed through the empty gallery. I made that drawing. I was 7 years old. My twin brother, River, was afraid of the ocean. I drew him a friendly whale to show him the water wasn't scary. I gave it one big eye so it could see all the beautiful fish. I wrote the date because it was the day before they separated us in the foster system. River went to a home upstate. I never saw him again. And now, my whale, our whale, was encased in glass, attributed to the early genius of Alistair Crane, part of a series called Subconscious Tides. Estimated value, $75,000. The curator, Daniel, rushed over. Sol, what's wrong? Where did this piece come from? My voice was a thread. The Crane archive, from his childhood foster home. Why? This isn't his. I pointed, my finger trembling. I drew this for my brother, June 10th, 2004. Daniel's expression shifted from concern to polite dismissal. Sol, that's impossible. Alistair Crane's provenance is impeccable. His foster mother authenticated all these pieces. His foster mother. The words tasted like acid. Mrs. Gable? Yes, is here tonight, actually. Of course she was. Eleanor Gable, the saintly foster mother who'd saved so many children, who'd taken me in for 6 months in 2004, who'd packed my drawings away in a folder she said she'd keep safe for when I was settled, who'd told me River had been adopted by a family who didn't want contact. I looked across the gallery. There she was, Eleanor Gable, now in her 60s, draped in silk, holding a champagne flute and holding court. And next to her, the man of the hour, Alistair Crane, tall, gaunt, with the haunted eyes that critics called windows to a tortured soul. I knew those eyes. They weren't haunted by trauma. They were hollow with theft. I had been erased twice, first as a brother, now as an artist. My grief had been framed, lit, and sold, and the man profiting from it was standing 50 feet away, sipping Pinot Noir. I picked up the broken glass, my hands steady now. I need some air, I told Daniel. Outside, the New York night was cold and bright. I leaned against the gallery's stone facade, the vibration of the city a dull roar in my bones. The rage wasn't hot. It was geological, a tectonic plate of injustice shifting after 21 years of silence. Alistair Crane hadn't found fragments. He had stolen them. From me, from River, from every silent, scattered child who'd passed through Eleanor Gable's care. I wiped my hands on my black trousers. I would not cry. I would not scream. I would become a curator myself. I would curate his downfall, and I would use the very system that had sanctified him to do it. My name is Sol Reyes. For 21 years, I had lived with a twin-shaped silence. River was my ghost limb, a constant, aching absence. I became a gallery assistant not for love of art, but to understand how value was assigned, how a story could transform trash into treasure. Now I understood the algorithm. Trauma plus obscurity plus a single savvy curator equals genius. I started my own audit that night, not of finances, but of memory. I went to the storage unit holding the sum total of my life, a 5x5 space holding a single plastic bin. In it were the few things I'd carried through 7 foster homes, a frayed teddy bear, a stack of report cards, and a folder. The folder held my childhood drawings from my time with Mrs. Gable. She'd encouraged us to draw to process our feelings. I'd drawn constantly. Whales for River, rockets for myself, tangled forests representing the system. At the end of my stay, she'd collected them. I'll keep these, Sol. They're too precious to drag around. When you have a forever home, I'll send them. She never did. My folder contained only photocopies. She'd kept the originals. I laid the copies out on the floor of my studio apartment. I photographed each one. Then I went to the Mercer's Digital Archive, a database I had admin access to as part of my job. I searched for Alistair Crane's digitized juvenilia. Piece by piece, I found them. My rocket ship drawing, now titled Ascent of the Lonely Astronaut. My scribbled forest, now called Thickets of the Unconscious. And the whale, Leviathan's Comfort. He hadn't just stolen one. He'd stolen a portfolio. My entire visual diary from the most traumatic year of my life had been repackaged as his formative vision. The evidence was a perfect damning mirror, but a JPEG in a database and a faded photocopy weren't enough. I needed physical proof. I needed the originals, and I needed to understand the supply chain. Eleanor Gable was the procurer. Alistair Crane was the face. But there had to be an authenticator, an expert who'd validated the lie. I found him in the exhibition catalog, Dr. Philip Armitage, noted child psychology and art scholar. He'd written the essay for the juvenilia section, pontificating on Crane's innate pre-verbal symbolism. His credentials were what made the theft bulletproof. This was the ecosystem. Gable supplied the raw material, the art of parentless children. Armitage provided the academic veneer. Crane performed the tortured genius. The galleries and collectors lapped it up, paying 6 and 7 figures for other people's pain. My revenge would not be a single accusation. It would be a systematic dismantling of all 3 pillars. I would need to become a better archivist than they were. My strategy required 2 phases: infiltration and exhumation. Phase 1, infiltration. I used my position at Mercer Modern to volunteer for the Crane Archive digitization project. It was tedious work no one wanted, scanning hundreds of fragile early sketches. It gave me unfettered, unsupervised access. I focused on the pieces I recognized. Under the high-resolution scanner, details emerged. On the back of Leviathan's Comfort, in the corner was a tiny graphite smudge. Zooming in, it wasn't a smudge. It was the erased remnant of pencil writing. Spectral imaging software from the conservation department revealed the ghost text, "For River." My brother's name, imperfectly spelled, but there. On another, Thickets of the Unconscious, I found a partial fingerprint in dried glue. Not Crane's, a child's. I compiled a digital dossier, high-res scans, spectral images, comparative analysis with my photocopies. I documented chain of custody gaps. Crane's provenance listed Eleanor Gable Foster Home, 2004, 2005. But foster homes don't give children art portfolios. They give them trash bags for their clothes. Phase 2, exhumation. I needed to find other sources. I tracked down former foster children from Mrs. Gable's care through closed Facebook groups for alumni of the system. It was delicate work. I posed as a researcher studying art therapy in foster care. I found 3. Mara, who'd done intricate ink drawings of birds, Ben, who'd made detailed comic strips, Lena, who'd sculpted small clay figures. All had been encouraged by Mrs. Gable. All had left their work with her. All had seen fragments of their style in Crane's later, mature work. Mara sent me a photo of a bird drawing she'd made. I saw something like this in his Avian Memories series. I thought it was just a weird coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. Crane wasn't just stealing childhood doodles. He was absorbing their styles, their themes, and reproducing them as his own evolution. The most critical find was Lena. She had a photograph of herself at age 9, holding one of her clay figures. In the background, on a shelf, was a drawing. It was my rocket ship. The photograph linked a specific piece of Crane juvenilia to a specific child at a specific time in Gable's home. It was a forensic nail in the coffin. My final move was to loop in the authenticator, Dr. Armitage, but not as an adversary, as a colleague. I requested a meeting, presenting myself as a lowly archive assistant, fascinated by his methodology. In his book-lined office, I showed him 2 images side by side on my tablet, my photocopy of the rocket ship and the scanned Ascent of the Lonely Astronaut. Doctor, I was cataloging and noticed this similarity. It's probably nothing, but the curator thought you should see it. He adjusted his glasses. His face, usually placid, flickered with something, not surprise, but recognition. He'd known. "Where did you get this copy?" he asked, his voice tight. "My personal papers. I was in Mrs. Gable's care in 2004. That's my drawing." The silence in the room was profound. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I see. You authenticated Crane's piece as his original work? How is that possible?" He removed his glasses, polishing them slowly. The provenance provided was compelling. The emotional narrative was cohesive. You didn't verify it. You validated a story you knew would sell. I didn't say it as an accusation, as a fact. He looked at me, his scholarly facade crumbling to reveal a tired, compromised man. "What do you want, Mr. Reyes?" "I want the truth archived," I said. "You can help me document it, or you can be documented as part of the fraud. Your choice." He chose self-preservation. In exchange for immunity from public exposure, he provided me with his private notes, emails from Gable pressuring him to see the genius in this poor boy's scribbles, his own handwritten doubts about dating the materials. I now had the complete chain: the supplier, the forger, and the authenticator. The system was fully mapped. All that remained was to pull the fire alarm. The grand unveiling of Crane's latest series, Echoes of Silence, was scheduled at Mercer Modern. The press was there. Collectors flew in. It was his triumphant peak. I timed my move for the curator's speech. Daniel was at the podium, praising Crane's lifelong excavation of memory. I stood in the back, dressed not in my assistant blacks, but in a simple, clean suit. I carried a slim archival box. As Daniel finished, I walked to the front, not rushed, deliberate. The crowd murmured, confused. "Sol?" Daniel whispered. I ignored him and faced the audience. I saw Crane, a smirk playing on his lips, thinking this was some fan's dramatic gesture. I saw Eleanor Gable, her smile frozen. "Good evening," I said, my voice clear in the hushed gallery. "I am Sol Reyes. I was a foster child in Eleanor Gable's care in 2004, and the art you've been celebrating tonight isn't Alistair Crane's. It's mine, and it belongs to other children like me." I opened the archival box. I placed my photocopies on the podium. Then, using the gallery's AV system, whose controls I knew intimately, I projected the evidence onto the massive white wall behind me. Side-by-side comparisons, my whale and Crane's Leviathan, the spectral image revealing Fore River, Lena's photograph with my rocket in the background, the email from Gable to Armitage. The boy has no family to claim these. They're essentially orphans. Alistair can give them a home. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, cameras flashed. Crane shot to his feet. "This is a lie. She's a jealous nobody." "Then explain this," I said, and played an audio clip. It was Dr. Armitage's voice from our recorded meeting saying the emotional narrative was cohesive. I'd edited it for maximum damning effect. I turned to Eleanor Gable. "You told me you were keeping my drawings safe. You were keeping them profitable." Her face was sheet white. "You misunderstood, Sol. I was preserving—" "You were trafficking," I cut in. "You took the last pieces of us and sold them to the highest bidder." Security moved toward me, but Daniel, looking shell-shocked, held up a hand. "Let him finish." I saved the final slide for last. A childhood photo of River and me, arms around each other, grinning, gaps in our teeth. You didn't just steal art. You helped steal my brother. You told me he was adopted. You told him I didn't want contact. The truth is, you kept us apart because together we might have remembered what you took. I looked directly at the cameras. Alistair Crane is not a genius. He's a thief. Eleanor Gable is not a saint. She's a broker. And this gallery and every institution that profited from this has been displaying stolen goods. The real artists are foster kids whose names you never bothered to learn. I picked up my box. The full evidence, including sworn statements from other victims, has been delivered to the New York Times, the District Attorney's Office, and the FBI's Art Crime Unit. The authentication is over. I walked out. The silence behind me was total. Then chaos erupted. But it wasn't my chaos anymore. It was theirs. The fallout was a media supernova. Genius exposed as fraud. Foster art scandal rocks elite. Crane's exhibitions worldwide were shuttered. Galleries scrambled to distance themselves. Eleanor Gable was charged with fraud, theft, and falsifying records. Dr. Armitage, having cooperated, received a lifetime ban from authentication boards, but avoided jail. The FBI recovered dozens of pieces from Crane's collection. A class action suit was filed on behalf of over a dozen former foster children. The restitution wasn't just financial, it was the return of identity. I got my originals back. The whale, the rocket, the forest. They arrived in a plain box from the evidence locker. I held the whale drawing, the paper fragile, the blue pigment faded. It was just a child's drawing, but it was mine. The greatest restitution, however, came 6 weeks later. A call from a social worker. They'd located River. He was living in Oregon, a woodworker. We met on a video call. The man on the screen had my eyes, but a calmer face. We stared at each other, crying and laughing. "They told me you didn't want to see me," he said, his voice thick. They told me you'd been adopted and forgotten me. We talked for 8 hours that first night. We filled in the gaps. His life, mine, the shared emptiness we'd both carried. He'd always felt a piece was missing. He'd even named his daughter Soleil. A month later, I flew to Oregon. We hugged in his driveway, a long, wordless embrace that felt like a bone finally settling into its socket. In his workshop, on the wall, was a framed print of a blue whale he'd bought online years ago because it felt familiar. I gave him the original drawing. "This was always yours," I said. He hung it in his living room, next to a photo of us as boys. The lawsuit settled. My share was substantial. I didn't buy a loft or travel the world. I used it to start the Provenance Project, a nonprofit that helps foster children document and retain ownership of their creative work. We provide locked digital archives, legal guidance, and a promise. Your story is yours. No one can frame it and sell it. Daniel, to his credit, resigned from Mercer Modern and joined our board. The art world, chastened, now funds our work as a form of penance. I still work in galleries, but now I am a consultant, specializing in ethical provenance. I teach institutions how to spot the ghosts in the artwork. Some nights, I sit with River and his family. His daughter draws pictures, whales, rockets, forests. We put them in her special folder, and we write her name clearly on the back. The silence I carried for 21 years is gone. In its place is a conversation, a reunion, a restored archive of a love that was never truly lost, just misfiled. Alistair Crane tried to build a legacy on fragments of stolen childhoods. He failed, because a fragment, when reclaimed, becomes the cornerstone of a new foundation, and a story, when told by its true author, can dismantle even the most carefully constructed lie.